Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Cabinet meeting of the 5th of September, to all of our Cabinet members, the officers here, people in the audience, and those of you who are watching. Just before I start the agenda, I want to say that this is an auspicious week for Medway. We've started our consultation on the local plan, and we're very excited about that. Today, we have the topping out ceremony at Splashes, so well done to Councillor Curry and others for going up on the roof and shouting from the rooftops that we're going to have a lovely, sustainable site there. We've got lots of really important items on the agenda tonight, and I'll be looking forward both to the debate and the contributions of Cabinet today. So, item 1, apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Maple, Councillor Price, and Councillor Marhill. Are there any other apologies? Thank you. We'll move on to item 2, the record of decisions of the last Cabinet meeting in August, pages 5 to 14. Are the Cabinet happy to accept that record of decisions, please? Okay, thank you. Any comments from anybody? Okay. Thank you. I'm going to move on to item 3, declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests and other significant interests, please. There are none. So I'll move to the first and I think really the most important item on the agenda today, Medway Local Plan and the Regulation 18 consultation, which I will pass to Councillor Curry. But before I do, I want to give everybody an assurance that we're extremely serious about this consultation. We want to hear from anyone in Medway who's got an interest and a stake in making sure that we have the best future that we can. Individuals, organisations, our friends and partners from the voluntary sector, from the health service, from right across the whole of public services that we work with, from businesses and other organisations. Councillor Curry will be talking about the consultation, but I want to make it very clear that this Labour Cabinet want people to have the highest quality housing, the best quality jobs that they can have, good health and places that they can enjoy in Medway. And being able to put this plan in place long after it was due, with a clear target for 2025, is incredibly important to us. We've got a laser focus on it. 3 Cabinet members are, together with the Chair of Planning, on a special group to make sure that we monitor the passage of the local plan. I'm starting this September with the consultation. So, Councillor Curry, I'm going to ask you to talk about it. And I thank you very much for the work that you did yesterday with myself and colleagues from planning who gave a really extensive and useful briefing to the local media, and I hope that colleagues in the media will play their part in encouraging everybody to take part in the local plan consultation. Indeed, I hope the local media will have something to say themselves about what they'd like to see from Medway. Okay, Simon, over to you.
Thank you very much, Teresa, and thank you everyone, and thank you very much to the staff and officers who produced this report. There's a huge amount of work goes into the manufacture, so the production of a plan of this nature. It covers every aspect of life for us all in Medway. This has been a long time coming. The previous plan that we're working with is 2003, and this plan has been through several iterations and is years and years out of date and has needed some, a new plan has been needed for a long time. And we're on that journey now together to have one by 2025. Part of that process is this Regulation 18, where we have to do a serious consultation with all the residents of Medway. This plan is about the environment, it's about jobs and the economy, it's about leisure and sports, it's about culture, transport, and of course it's about housing as well. We have housing allocations from government of 28,500 homes. That's over 1,600 new homes a year need to be built. We are not building that many at the moment. We're not even close to that number at the moment. So it's a real challenge lying ahead of us if we are to achieve that level of housing in Medway. And what we want to make sure of, that whatever we do is based upon a principle of sustainable development. That means that what we do today affects the lives and the futures of the next generation and the generation after that. Medway is a place where we want people to live and work and raise their families for generations to come. And that means we have to have it as a sustainable and clean and green environment for everybody. So that's what this plan is, a sort of core principle at the heart of this plan. And so we have some huge challenges ahead of us. And what we want to do at the moment is just simply get everybody's views on board. The process that we're in will be launched formally on the 18th of September for 6 weeks. And everybody is welcome to make their contributions. There'll be links online. There'll be links to your local councillors. You can please talk to your local councillors about this. It's really important. I'm sure you'll be hearing from them as well. But get your views heard. As Teresa was saying, this is about community groups. It's about volunteers. It's about the business sector. It's about all parts of our community, whether you're churches or whatever kind of community group you are. You have a right to have a say, and now is the chance to do that. So there's a 6-week period starting from September the 18th. And what we want to do is to hear from as many people as possible. Just as an adjunct to that, there is one slight amendment to be made on the document, which we need Cabinet approval for. So when we get to the recommendation, I'll mention that at the end. And I'm open to any comments and questions.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Nashaba.
To reflect the comments that have already been made, as one of the other Cabinet members that's been supporting this process, I think there just needs to be a bit of a recognition that this is a place that we have been in before when it has come to local plan development, and that it's really important that we're able to get a local plan into place in Medway, because of everything that we've mentioned, that Simon's just mentioned, around how we deliver strategic development across our towns, whether that be housing delivery, employment space, education, green spaces, are all going to be underlying principles that are determined by the local plan. And it's really important that we have that in place, because the whole time that we don't have something that is modern and fit for purpose for Medway, we put ourselves at risk to opportunities and people coming and looking to develop and build in areas that perhaps we wouldn't necessarily want to see development come forward in. So I think it's really important that people recognise the importance of the local plan and that they play their role during the consultation process and feeding into it. This is your opportunity to shape the future of Medway, and we really do want to hear from a cross-section from across the different communities within Medway. And I think it would be great as if part of this consultation we can make sure that we are reaching out to as many different groups as possible, and particularly to young people as well, who ultimately will be a big part of this process going forward. I think it's important to have it on the record how vital it is that we get this right, but also how vital it is that this document has the input of Medway residents, because we do want it to be a truly collaborative process.
Thank you, Nashaba. And can I say, we're going to have a roadshow of the local plan briefing going out to community groups. And I think it's extremely important that you've mentioned young people who should be able to have a say in what they think the future of the town should look like, because I hope that when their education is finished, they will stay here and work and be part of the good future that we want them to have. So it would be nice, I think, through you, Tracy, if we could work with planning to see if we can organise some briefings, particularly for secondary schools. And I'll have that, I think, as an additional action as part of the recommendations, please. Yep.
Thank you. I obviously want to support option B so that the public has the most amount of time and consultation to have their say on this very important document. Given my brief, I did also want to highlight that it's not just about housing, although that does tend to take up a lot of the focus. This plan is also setting out, our employment land, what our high streets could look like, the kinds of businesses that we will have in Medway, the kind of jobs that our young people will have, and it's important that those aspects of the local plan aren't lost when we, quite rightly focus a lot on where we want to be building our houses. And I just wanted to reiterate, that unlike the previous administration's failure to agree a local plan over the last 20 years, there is a real genuine commitment in the Medway and Labour Cooperative Group to make sure that we deliver a local plan in 2 years. We want to avoid speculative developments that we have at the moment because we don't have a local plan in place that's up to date. And obviously our main goal here is to facilitate sustainable housing, sustainable development and communities in Medway. We don't want to just be building houses, we also want to be, having the infrastructure that is needed to support any new communities that we are creating. And as I mentioned, the economic growth and the jobs that we need to help Medway really thrive over the next few years.
Thank you very much, Teresa. And I also welcome this item. I think it's absolutely critical that we get a local plan in place. In fact, this was one of the determinants for us winning the election, was the drift, decay and decorum of our previous administration, and the fact that they couldn't deliver this, and we will deliver this plan. I think there's three things worth mentioning. The context of the housing numbers. So this is actually really important, because the housing numbers that we are required to deliver are set by the Conservative government. So if individuals have issues and concerns around the housing numbers, these are all centrally imposed, and we will work within the legislative environment and the context of that to deliver on our obligations as a local authority. But as has been said, those targets are extremely high, but they are set nationally by individuals that we cannot control. So if people have concerns around housing numbers, they should direct queries to MPs as well around those housing numbers. I think it's really important that we have as open a dialogue as possible without prejudging any outcomes of a Reg 18 consultation. We should be open-minded to any proposal that comes in and let the public make a decision. And I think our commentary, in this report and also more broadly, is open-minded. And I think that's the most important part, that we do not prejudge any element of this, and I think we've been very careful as administration not to do so, and I just implore other councillors to also be aware of that situation and not to look like they're prejudging or determining situations as well. And just thirdly, businesses are absolutely crying out for a clear direction of travel around a local plan. And I think it's important also for residents and communities, because of the speculative developments that we've had. Many of these developments may not have always been to the specification that we would like, and there might have been an overdevelopment in a number of areas that we would not have wanted, or other members would have wanted. And I think having a local plan will give us that absolute certainty of direction, and also give communities that position where they understand the obligations, and those obligations are across all of our area to support an increase in population that is demanded upon us. And just lastly, and it's without reference, clearly we need infrastructure to go alongside this local plan, and it is extremely disappointing, actually, that we've lost that £170 million worth of infrastructure funding, and it's really disappointing that we're not getting the support from our Conservative MPs on that infrastructure. We need roads, leisure facilities, and other facilities as well for residents if we are to see this housing demand. And I think it's really important that we get that made clear in the plan as well, that infrastructure demands are needed, and we will need the support of 3 local MPs fighting our case in Parliament for increased infrastructure monies. Thank you.
Just before I come back to you, Simon, I think what everyone has said, and particularly at the end there, Tristan, what you said about the fact that these housing number targets have been sent down to us by the government. There's been a lot of talk by Michael Gove and others about changes that they were going to make, a lot of promises. This was said to Councillor Mapler and I when we met the 3 local MPs, but actually we've seen nothing at all to change those numbers. But the really clear message that I want everyone to hear is that we are listening. We will take your contributions to the consultation very seriously. We will make sure that officers have a thorough review of the evidence that is put forward by anybody who puts that evidence forward. And we're interested to know what other people want the future of the Medway towns. Do you share our vision for Medway to be a significant place in the southeast with high quality homes, jobs, places to enjoy, and good health that can be determined by having all of those things in place? And my message to all councillors, including opposition councillors, is I hope you will encourage people to participate in the local plan. I hope you will put submissions in yourselves, as the Labour group did when we were in opposition, always on the record and always in public. I hope that other people will do that, and I hope that you will listen to your constituents and give them a fair hearing and make sure that you take advantage of the roadshow that's on offer if you've got communities who you think might be disadvantaged, particularly digitally disadvantaged, and any help that we can give for people to participate, that's on offer as well. So I'll go back to you, Simon, for the recommendations, please, and I know that you need to add an amendment.
Thanks very much, Teresa, and thank you to my colleagues for your contributions. Really positive and clear points that you've made there, which I agree with entirely. This is actually a very exciting time for Medway. If you look at the future that we've got going forward, there's a lot of really good stuff that we've got to celebrate here, and there's more to come, if you like, in that respect. So we are, I mean, it sounds challenging, and it is challenging, but it's also exciting. So I'm looking forward to the next stage of this. What happens after the consultation? We go into the process of analysis of the results. All the views that we collect together will be going to the planning team, and they'll look through things very carefully. And then the final product will be a draft plan which goes off to the planning inspectorate for its consideration. And that can take a long time, but we're hoping that after the by about autumn 2025, the process will be complete, and we will have an adopted plan to guide us into the future up to 2040. And that's the process that we're in now. So in that respect, I'm going to move the substantive amendment, which is that the Cabinet are requested to approve the publication of Local Plan Regulation 18 consultation document as laid out in Appendix 1 of this report. There is an amendment to the report. One of the maps, map 4, has a very tiny error on the boundary of the green belt. So in addition to the recommendation at paragraph 1.1 of the report, I would also like to propose an additional recommendation that the Cabinet is asked to delegate authority to the Director of Place in consultation with the portfolio holder for climate change and strategic regeneration to correct the error in Appendix 1 in relation to the Greenbelt boundary at Map 4 and to make any other minor amendments and clarifications required ahead of publication. It's a very small error, but the legal process requires this to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Is there a seconder for the recommendation and for the associated amendment, please? Thank you, Lauren. All of those in favour of the recommendation? Is that agreed? Thank you very much. So we're on to a really exciting process for the local plan consultation. Simon, it's you again.
Thank you.
For item 5 and 6, which I think we're going to take together, the Star Hill to Sun Pier Conservation Area Appraisal and Management Plan, a request for to go to public consultation, and the Star Hill to Sun Pier Conservation Area Significance-Led Development Framework Supplementary Planning Document, request to go to public consultation. And before you speak, Simon, I want to add my thanks to all of the very creative, enthusiastic people, particularly those living in the intra part of what is one of our new Labour wards, Fort Pitt ward, who have shown such commitment to getting these things through. And this report really gives us a strong vision of what this area is developing into and what it can be like. So I'm very excited about this. And again, I hope that as many people as possible will have as much enjoyment and commitment as the people who've already been involved in giving us their ideas about these two consultations. So over to you again, Simon.
Thanks very much, Teresa. This is a very exciting project. It's something that I've been involved in for quite a while, and I know that Councillor Mahill, if he were here this evening, would have a lot to say on this, because it has a massive cultural impact on the area concerned, commonly known as the intra area. But in terms of this report, it's the it's the Star Hills, the Sun Pier conservation area. And the appraisals and management plans are really key. Conservation areas are have a huge amount of importance in our area for Medway. We've got about 24 of them altogether, I believe. And they incorporate all sorts of really historic features, architectural features, historic events and activities as well, all brought together to celebrate Medway's massive cultural history, going back to pre-Roman times in many respects. And this appraisal of this part of Medway, the intra area, provides the data and the information that we need then to go ahead with a management plan for the area. That's what item 5 is all about here, and looking at that. But part of that process, again, involves a public consultation. And over the last few years, we've had this wonderful cultural consortium of residents and businesses and local people and outsiders as well, who come together on a regular basis to talk and discuss the future of this area and to plan events and activities as well, and to raise money and to do some greening projects. There's even a small meadow now at St Bart's Chapel created by a few volunteers down there. So there's all sorts of wonderful things going on. But we do need to do a proper formal public consultation for this element of the work, and that's what item 5 is about. Item 6, which is slightly different, is all about development frameworks. This is a consultation on the conservation area because of its significance as a historic feature of Medway. Any development that takes place there, significance-led development, if you like, has to be very tightly controlled to make sure that we retain the historic and architectural qualities of the area, whilst also thinking about its future and how businesses and how local people can see a future for the area as well. What we're, in many respects, and a lot of this is discussed by the Culture Consortium, is we want Inchy to become a destination for local people to go and have a really good time, to see the lovely quality of the characters there, opening up the river frontage so you can walk along the river there, that kind of thing, and also for tourists. I mean, they're coming down to Rochester High Street and the castle, the cathedral, to the docks, and then this lovely intra-area in between the two. So that's kind of the thinking behind there. But again, if we're to do a development framework as part of the planning process, we need to do this public consultation. And that's what this report's about. It's just asking Cabinet to approve that this next stage in the development. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. And just a plug for this area. They've got a lot of exciting things going on this weekend. Historic tours, events, all sorts of things, helping people to really understand what we hope this area can develop into. Anyone else, please? Lauren?
Thanks, Teresa. I obviously support both going to public consultation. I think the item 5 document is really important to having us understand the area's history and the design nature of the area's heritage assets, which is obviously very important as we kind of set out the vision for what that area could look like in item 6, the development framework. I think the area is clearly primed to become really the heart of Medway's creative sector, and I can already see that the High Street Heritage Action Zone funds to regenerate that area are having the desired effect. Last month, I spoke to a local fashion business who is looking to expand, is really keen to move into the area, not only because there may be viable spaces there with the floor space, but also because it would locate her business in the heart of a really creative community. People matter in the creative industry, as they do in every job, but particularly the creative sector, with people bouncing off ideas. And it's really important that we support that as much as we can. There are lots of vacant plots in that area that I think should be the focus of regeneration, both homes and businesses. And there are lots of empty ground floor properties that I think we could really encourage for retail and commercial operations. So I think we need as a council to look at how we can incentivise that to make that happen, and something that I'm very committed to, as I am committed to dealing with all vacant properties in our town centres. I think another key improvement that's particularly highlighted under item 6 is improving the whole area for pedestrians. And I also think, some very smart changes, as they're sort of discussed in the report, to change the public realm at either end, attaching to both Chatham Town Centre and Rochester Town Centre, both of whom have quite frequent town centre events, will be really useful just in driving that footfall down into the area when we have a lot of influx of visitors to come and enjoy everything that those town centres have to offer. And I obviously welcome a focus on widening pavements as well, and sort of not having that area so dominated by cars. Because one of the things that's also articulated under item 6 is making this area potentially a place where we have an outdoor dining culture, which I think would be really, really positive for local businesses and for the residents who live in the area. Recently, they had the Poco Loco Parklet, the greening of the area, which was hugely popular with residents, and I'm really keen to support those kind of initiatives wherever we can. And I would just encourage existing businesses in the area and those that are thinking of moving there to take part, because the document will certainly frame bids for future funding, planning applications that will come forward. Planners will have to explain how they've complied with the framework. So it's really important that we have as many people as possible giving their input and helping to shape it. So we just encourage everybody to have their say. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Anyone else on item 5 or item 6? Okay, thank you. Then I'm going to go to the recommendations on agenda item 5 first. Asking Cabinet to approve the commencement of public consultation on the draft Star Hill to Sun Pier Conservation Area Appraisal and Management Plan, given the significant potential benefits outlined in the report. Is that agreed? Thank you. And I will move on now to... Sorry, my computer's going on and off just for a minute, so I'll let it have its head, as it were. Yeah, thank you. My screen had gone off, Richard, thank you. It's back. Okay, thank you. And just looking for the recommendations for the management plan. My screen's refusing to show me the recommendations, so I think it would be helpful if somebody else could read the recommendations. Simon, please. Yeah. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks, Teresa. Just to recommend it in item 6 of the agenda, recommendation 1.1, the Cabinet is requested to approve commencement of public consultation on the draft Star Hill to Sun Pier Development Framework Supplementary Planning document.
Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Moving to agenda item 7, the Safer, Healthier Streets programme, red routes and moving traffic enforcement. Simon, you're going to take that item, and I know that Tristan, you're going to be contributing to it. And I would say to everybody, this is a really important move to improving air quality and getting rid of congestion in Medway. And I'm very pleased that associated with this as one of the measures, the scrutiny groups have chosen improving air quality as a special task group for this year, and I think that's absolutely critical to keeping our population as healthy as can, particularly focusing on children and getting our town centres moving. So over to you again, Simon, to start, please.
Thanks very much, Teresa. This is item 7. It's all about, the item here, it's called red routes and moving traffic enforcement because it is an enforcement process. But really behind this is about people's quality of life. People who have to live in the most congested parts of Medway, living with the air pollution that comes. Part of our agenda as a council moving forward, as has been said a number of times already this evening, is about happier, healthier, greener community. Addressing issues of congestion helps the economy, it helps the community, and it helps the environment. And so tackling these things is hugely important. We know that air pollution impacts all of our lives in so many different ways, and particularly our children and young people. And this is one of the measures that we're bringing forward to address that. So I'll pass over to my colleague, Tris, who will deal with the details of this.
Thank you very much, Simon. And just to put on record, my thanks to officers. Ruth Delu's team was truly outstanding in the work that they've undertaken with Alex and a number of others as well. So I just want to put that on record. This proposal has and is of note to many residents, and it is, as Simon has just mentioned, is part of our renewed emphasis on quality of life and place shaping in local neighbourhoods. And under this administration, we're focused on building better connected transport networks to ensure everyone can get to where they need to go reliably and safely. And that means challenging congestion, which was raised on doorstep after doorstep, and concerns around traffic. And that is part of a wider programme around safer, healthier streets. This particular document is dealing with two key initiatives within that. Red routes, which I will talk about firstly, which is replacing double yellow lines in 5 key locations, and then the moving traffic enforcement restrictions, which have government support, that will enable residents, visitors and businesses to move around Medway's network safely and with the benefit of improved journey times. So both proposals are designed to reduce congestion across the road network by allowing more efficient traffic flows. So if I talk about firstly about the red routes proposal and the background to it. So we launched the consultation and we had a sum total of 1,000 responses. It was a well responded to consultation. And we have broken down the consultation responses in the paper, and in particular to note those residents with Medway postcodes and in direct periphery of the aforementioned zones. And we can see in the consultation responses that 4 of those were largely 50-50 in response, and 1 was not. And as a response to that, we have engaged in a process of listening and have produced a series of counter-proposals, which can be located on the document in specific locations, for which residents can again be consulted upon. And it might be the case that there are, as part of the traffic order process, there might be further conversations and proposals coming forward, should that be necessary. So this is an iterative process. We're not near the end of it, but we are now in the formal stage of it. So, but I would like to put on record my thanks to all of those who responded to the informal consultation. I can say that you were absolutely listened to in terms of your responses, those that were positive towards all of the responses, those that were negative with contingencies, and you can see that those contingencies are listed, and ultimately we have to make a judgment. Red routes are not about any programme that is being delivered in London. Okay, red routes are a long established 30-year traffic proposal introduced in the early 90s in London and are widespread across urban areas. And they are designed to reduce congestion. That is their sole function. And they are found largely on main transport networks, largely A roads, and they effectively reduce parking in those particular locations. It is not linked to any other proposal going on elsewhere. It was also about respecting existing parking bays. So with red routes, all of those parking bays would be unaffected. The red routes would be enforced using cameras, and money from those fines will be reinvested into Medway's streets. So we are listening to residents concerned around the degradation of our road network and potholes, and we will seek to reuse that money to replenish our streets as they currently sit. And it is about does fit into our wider transport plan about keeping Medway moving and for safer, healthier streets. Many of these locations are air quality zones and have documented high levels of nitrous oxide and other emissions. And it is envisioned that this would see a reduction in those air pollutant emissions. In terms of the moving transport proposals, these are entirely separate but within the document. So it must be noted that a letter was received by the government minister giving us permission to undertake moving transport as part of a designation order. And this was issued to all 3 MPs and to Councillor Maple on the 26th of June, where the Minister for Roads, Richard Holden, said, used appropriately, these new civil enforcement powers will play a key role in improving the efficiency and safety of journeys for all road users. And I am delighted to see Medway Council receiving these powers. So the Minister has given permission, and that was laid before Parliament on the 27th of June and came into force on the 22nd of July. These road orders are restrictions aligned to lined bays and movement on main roads, and it will see the introduction of penalty fines for those who are caught in those junctions. I'm just going to make note of the fact that there has been some commentary elsewhere around introduction of red routes and other proposals. So red routes, despite the commentary from elsewhere, are not a revenue-generating exercise. That is not the case. In fact, you would not be able to introduce them on the basis that they were a revenue-generating exercise. So whichever advice was received by members to that effect, they need to be honest and publish that to the media and others, so that we can actually see if that was the advice given or if it was just conjecture and actually used to produce that. So I'm calling on individuals, if they have such evidence, to prove their point. I'm saying that now, and they can prove that. Second of all, the budget item, this proposal, red routes and others, was in the budget under the previous administration. In fact, it was the previous administration that actually requested the use of designated powers for such an item. So again, we have continued that work, but the roads that we have indicated are not based on revenue. They are based on areas of congestion only, and where we see reduced congestion. So we are not using this in any other capacity, and any alternative to that effect is simply untrue, and individuals need to be held to account for offering those views. And then just lastly, I want to just remind residents that these are orders, but you absolutely can respond to documentation that will be displayed around the implementation of these areas. So please do respond to consultations. If you have further ideas, please pass those on to councillors and local members, and we can feed that back into this process, in particular in Raynham, but also other locations. If you have other suggestions, we are always listening. And we'll always be keen to hear if there are compromises and other views that people have. So I'm happy, therefore, to recommend items 1.3 and 1.4. And in addition to that, taking note of section 5.7 and 5.4, which is the recommended option 3 on the paper. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tristan. Just before I ask for approval for the recommendation, Simon, I'll come to you if you want to add anything. But I think, Tristan, thank you. It's important to remind everybody that there has been some ridiculous misinformation about the purpose and status of these actions, with local politicians, including the MP for Gillingham, trying to pretend that this is a sort of ULEZ style action and trying to garner resident support for his misguided ideas around that. I'm very sad to hear that has happened because, as was mentioned before, we're interested in reducing congestion and improving air quality, and that's what these moves are for. Nashaba, and then Lauren, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to put on my record, firstly, thanks, Tristan, for that very comprehensive detail of how this process has been conducted, but also thanks to officers who have led on this process. It's very clear that there has been a level of consultation that has been looked at very, very carefully when implementing this. And I think the fact that there are some clear priorities around reducing congestion, but also looking at air quality, which is an absolute priority across Medway, but certainly in certain core areas, it is vital that we do something to address that. So this is a really helpful step in doing so. I think in the spirit, and Tristan, you did mention this when you gave your feedback, but in the spirit of the collaborative process that has been undertaken to date, it would be really helpful if that can continue, so that we continue to have those conversations with residents, we continue to review and look at what's working, what isn't, and as we start to get some of that data back, we make this an ongoing, we set in those clear review mechanisms to make sure that there is that ongoing dialogue, so we're getting this right, because that's obviously the key here, unlike the comments that have been made by certain members and also by certain members of Parliament, and Teresa, you mentioned they're the Member of Parliament for Gillingham and Raynham. This is not about creating a revenue-generating scheme or trying to infringe on people's rights. It is about looking at some of the issues that we've got in Medway towns and certainly around congestion and air quality, and finding some practical and sensible solutions to how we can manage and look at that. So I would just say that that ongoing dialogue with residents is really, really important as part of this, because I think we need to ensure that people understand why this is happening, what the impacts will be, and potentially the benefits, and also to be able to, for us to be able to monitor that as a local authority to ensure that we've got it right as well.
Thank you, Nishara. And just before I come to you, Lauren, I think the recommendations do definitely allow for that. The delegations to officers are clear that we want them to proceed, but we want that to be an iterative process as we go along. And I think, Nishara, you quite rightly referred to some of the chatter that there has been around freedom and rights. For me, this is about people's rights to clean air and about being able to move around the towns in a timely way so that we can get where we're going. And the idea that somehow it's a restraint on freedom, I'm afraid, is for the birds.
Thanks, Teresa. I just really wanted to also highlight that we have changed the plans to incorporate new loading bays, which are very important to businesses. So it's very important to highlight that feedback from businesses has been listened to and that we've accommodated that in the plans that you've brought forward today, Tris. I also just wanted to take an opportunity to welcome particularly the pedestrianisation that's involved in the enforcement of moving traffic offences. I think the motor vehicle restrictions on Gillingham High Street and Rochester High Street on Saturday will be really beneficial to local businesses. It will make it better for places for pedestrians to come and spend money in our local high streets. And I know it's really popular too, with I think 78 and 76% of respondents agreeing with those measures. So it's great that we're having such support from the public to something that I think is also going to be really beneficial to business and make our high streets much better places to shop. But, you know, obviously with the caveat that it's very important that there's clear signage and that people are made aware of that, you know, well before it's put into place. But really, really welcome it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Gina, and thank you, Tris, for all the detailed work that you've put into this, as well as the staff, and thank you for the comments from colleagues. I mean, I think my main point, it almost makes me laugh. Actually, we don't want to generate any revenue from this at all. That would be lovely, wouldn't it, if it actually worked and we didn't have any revenue. So to consider it in that way is just frankly, for the birds, I think, is the way you described it. So I'd like to move the recommendation as laid out by Tris and in paragraph 1.1 and up to 1.4 of the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for the recommendation? President, and is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you, everybody. So I'll move on to item 8, the Disabled Facilities Grant and Financial Assistance Policy. Please, Ms. Sharp.
Thank you very much, Teresa. So I'm really happy to bring forward this review of the Disabled Facilities Grant and Financial Assistance Policy, which essentially determines how capital funding granted to us through the Better Care Fund is used to make adaptations and improvements to people's homes where they are required. What this policy has done is provided... sorry, just technology. I think it's like the curse of these meetings. So, sorry, just to go back to that. So what this does is it sets out how we use capital funding through loans and grants through the Better Care Fund to make improvements and adaptations to people's homes. It introduces a range of much more flexible policies and funding which is made available. So it's a much stronger way for us to support some of my most vulnerable residents. And I think the process that's been undertaken to create this policy has been really comprehensive. It's taken into account a number of considerations. And to point out one of those as an example is around our military community here in Medway. We've had a really collaborative process where we've agreed that their assessments under the funding will not take into account any compensation that they have received due to their military service, which again is also paying is also in line with our Armed Forces Covenant. So we've looked very closely in terms of developing this policy to be able to ensure it provides a level of flexibility and really is able to establish kind of where we've got vulnerable residents or people that require those adaptations, that there is enough flexibility and leverage within this to support them. So I'd welcome Cabinet's support for it because I think it's been well consulted, well looked at and well developed. And I think it will be a really helpful policy for us to take forward.
Thank you, Nashaba. And before I ask anybody else, it's important, I think, to obviously, I support everything that you've said, and I want to place on record the work that is done in adult social care jointly with the team in housing to put people forward, to take them through the process, to make sure that the facilities and equipment and adaptations that people get to allow them to stay as independent and safe as possible in their own homes requires a huge amount of input from our social work teams, and indeed from our staff who help supply that equipment and get it to people in a timely way. Would anyone else like to speak on this item? Simon and then Tracy, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Teresa, and thank you, Nishal, for this item and for the work that's been put into doing it. I think one of the key elements of this that it strikes me most strongly is about the idea that a lot of the work that we're putting in together as a group is all about our community and bringing much more greater benefit to the community and the people in most need within that community. And I love the way that this brings this flexibility so that people can say they've actually been listened to. When they've got issues, we can be flexible, we can make allowances for the situation they're in, and we can listen and make the changes that are needed. And I think we're hearing more and more stories of so many people now hitting that struggling point, hitting that point in their finances particularly, where they can no longer cope. And this helps in some measure towards helping those people out. So I'm really strongly in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Tracy.
I really welcome this policy. I think it's in people's interest so often to stay in their own homes, and I feel that this policy has removed quite often a lot of barriers that would stop people being able to do that. It enables people to have a more flexible approach to making sure that their homes are well equipped so that they can stay in there if they want to, that their houses are adapted when necessary, and it's beneficial in terms of their own health, but also in taking pressure off our social care for adults. Which in turn will benefit other people in Medway. So I really welcome this policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Nashaba, I'm going to, if nobody else wants to speak, I'm going to go back to you for the recommendations and just remind Cabinet, please, that we're recommending option 1, which is to adopt the revised policy, with option 2 being don't adopt the revised policy. So it's just the way that it's written in the paper so that we're clear.
Okay. Thank you, Teresa. So as you've just stated, I would put forward, so my recommendation to Cabinet is that we adopt option 1, which agrees the adoption of the revised policy as it is set out in the paper.
Thank you. Is there a second for that? Simon, thank you very much. And is that agreed? Okay, thank you. Right, moving on to the household, item 9, the Household Support Fund full year allocation and free school meals amendment, which I'll be taking on behalf of Councillor Maple. What this report does, and once again, I do thank officers for the really detailed work that's gone into this, is to make sure that we're making absolutely the best use that we can of the Household Support Fund, and that it accords with everything that we're trying to do with our cost of living policy. The officers have been very careful to watch where money has been spent and move it around to where it can be most effective. So you'll see that there is some additional money for redistribution by the Medway Food Partnership, who will be having a big launch event, I'm pleased to say, in November, which is exciting. That's making sure that everyone is fed well and that we encourage people to eat as healthily as possible. And I hope everyone will join us down at the university for that event. It also has removed some of the barriers that were clearly there when people were applying to the Household Support Fund. Having to do an income and expenditure set of figures was very challenging for people, and we're moving to a position where they can submit their bank statements and the work will be done for them by the officer teams, which I think is very welcome for lots of people who find that difficult. And it was clear that it was a barrier because we were starting to underspend on our predictions of the fund when we know that with inflation as high as it is and the struggles that people are facing with rises in rent and mortgages, we would have seen many more people coming forward. So these changes are really welcome, and they've been, I'm pleased to say, thought through very, very quickly by officers and will be sent out and explained to the public. There's plenty of help for this, and I know that our partners in the community and voluntary sector are helping everybody who wants to apply for the fund to do so, and I do thank all of those organisations that have been involved in that process. Right, I'll ask if anyone else would like to comment, please. We're all impressed and very happy with the work that's been done. So I'll move now to the recommendations, and I hope that my lovely, lovely screen will let me see them. Just for the help people who can help us with tech and feed things back. What was happening was that the screen was just flashing in and out and I couldn't see anything. But on this occasion, I'm very pleased to say that I'm able to see the recommendations. So the recommendations on page 327, I'm asking Cabinet to agree the proposal set out in section 5 as our revised approach to delivering the Household Support Fund, give delegated authority to the Chief Operating Officer in consultation with the Leader of the Council to submit a revised delivery plan, which will have to go to the Department of Work and Pensions. And I think actually there is a parliamentary event that will be represented at by officers, which is talking about the future direction of the Household Support Fund. And very clearly the message that we are sending is that we need it to continue because things don't appear to be improving for people anytime soon. We're also asking for some delegated authority to the Director of Public Health to disperse 150,000 to members of the Medway Food Partnership, and again, agree to delegate authority to the Chief Operating Officer with the Leader of the Council to determine how to disperse any residual balance should it become clear that we're not going to utilise the full allocation. You'll remember in the first iteration that we had of the Household Support Fund, disgracefully, money was sent back. It hadn't been spent. So officers have worked really hard to safeguard the fund and make sure that as many people as possible can benefit. So with that, is there a seconder for those recommendations, please? Thank you, Tracy. And is that agreed? Thank you, everybody. So I'll move now to our last item this evening.
Sorry, Deputy Leader, can I just interrupt? Can I just check you've moved the recommendations as written on the report and not as you...
Yes, as written on the report. Thank you, Bhupinder. Not as I made up by reading them out. No, they were written on the report. Thank you. Item 10, then, the Treasury Management Outturn report. So let me just get the right page for that as well, which is page 331, everybody. And here it comes. I don't know why my computer's a bit slow tonight. Right, thank you. This report then from our Chief Operating Officer gives an overview of Treasury management activity during 22-23 and gives us assurance that the Council complied with its legislative and regulatory requirements. And I think, Tristan, with your previous work on audit, I'm going to ask you to speak on this first, please.
Thank you very much, Teresa. And indeed, having had a number of years on audit committee, this report would have and has been reviewed by that committee, and they have produced a series of commentary, which we have taken on board. This report will also be presented to full council for consideration for all members and for further dialogue in that forum as well. So just for context, so the council is required to produce Treasury management reports and activities under the Local Government Act. I think looking at the context around the country, around local government finance, it is even more important today that we look at these reports with a close eye in terms of their outcomes. Treasury is effectively, for those watching, it's the management of the council's finances, the management of money within the organisation. So I'm going to break it down into a series of areas, and I will give some public commentary for those interesting. So the capital expenditure and financing. So this is the amount that the council is borrowing for large-scale projects. That is section 5 of the report. And it does say on, and section 6 as well, 6.5, that we are within the capital finance requirement. So we are within the provision that is set for this authority as part of the Treasury management strategy passed on the 24th of February. So we are, from a capital perspective, we are within the envelope of acceptability around that. And it must be noted that a significant proportion of our capital is actually funded by grant from government and is not around borrowing, which is significant actually compared to other local authorities. Moving on to the Treasury positions, that is the cash management position of the organisation. This was highlighted as being somewhat of a concern. I know over previous years there has been some back and forth around short-term provision of monies versus long-term, and I think there was an aspiration to move into long-term provision. Of course, with interest rate changes, that has not always been possible. And in particular note is an area of issue for me is 7.3 concerning LOBOs. LOBOs were a significant amount of borrowing undertaken by the previous administration, and there's been significant press and media on that from in the BBC and others. I can say that we can't extract ourselves from those LOBOs without the aforementioned banks indicating a change in conditions, and no formal approaches have been made on that basis. One thing that was raised by Audit Committee actually was section 7.6, and it was a concern in opposition actually that we raised on numerous occasions around small amounts of investments that we made, relatively speaking, into property funds. We have seen profits from those property fund investments over the last period of time, but it must be noted in this report that overall gains and losses are seeing a downturn in property funds. So with anything with property, I'm afraid that does happen, and Audit Committee's recommendations or commentary is that we take a close look at that going forward and to ensure that we make prudential decisions in a sensible way. And I think it would be of note on 7.5 and 7.6 that it is envisioned that we would not be seeing this on a sustained basis. Moving forward around our risk appetite, this organisation has actually manages its treasury in-house, and we've had a long-standing officer team who do an outstanding job in that capacity. We do have actually, compared to many authorities, a regularly tight risk perspective, which we have inherited, and actually that's something that both opposition and the administration have largely followed over the last period of time, and that's something which we will continue to pursue. Just on terms of the going forward, in terms of the investment outturn, so the council does have monies invested across with a number of other peer organisations, and I draw people's attention to set 11.4 on the report. So what you're looking at there is the yield from our investments and the range within the yield. So the green line being the upper range of the yield and the red line being the lower end of the yield. And you can see that Medway is outperforming its peer authority. So that actually says says something that our internal teams are working well to maximise the revenues that we can have from Treasury around other investments. Section 12.9 to 12.13 are around some of the other questions that were concerning members and audits, specifically the cost of loans, the minimum revenue position, and our authorised borrowing limits. So a series of accounting measures were responded to members in those capacities. And lastly, just around the economic climate. This is actually key to this report and actually all reports. Since the Trust budget last year, which has, I think it would be fair to say, caused a confidence crisis in the markets on this government and its track record, something of which they've not responded, we all have to be aware of the volatility of markets and the potential concern for a rise in interest rates linked to Truss's feckless decision-making that was made last year. And so, as a responsible authority, we have to be mindful of the fact that our economic environment at the present time is not benign, and that as an organisation, we should always steer on a risk-averse sort of platform, and on the whole we have steered that way in the past, and that is indeed where we wish to steer in the future. And on that end, I would recommend a note to this report for consideration by Cabinet. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tristan. Anyone else? Lauren.
Thank you, Tris. I just wanted to raise, I think, there's a section in the report where it talks about member training on Treasury management issues being undertaken in September 2019 to support members' scrutiny role. Obviously, I think that needs to be done again, given the significant number of new members on the council, and will be particularly beneficial for those new members on the audit committee. I think from an overview and scrutiny perspective, we should make sure that training is undertaken again. I would note that the long-term borrowing from other local authorities has gone up significantly over the last year, but that information is provided in the paper as to the level of exposure, and it seemed to me a reasonable spread for risk mitigation. I did wonder if perhaps there could be a consideration given to reduction in property fund exposure, but the paper does, you know, despite the decline in the value of the investments, obviously due to commercial property market conditions, they do, you know, obviously provide a source of revenue, but I think that's something that we should keep under consideration. And then just a final point, 12.5 of the paper obviously talks about rates recently having risen faster than expected, and are thought to be near their peak. I think it's a fairly reasonable assumption that, you know, we would be able to, in future, any debt maturing could be replaced with loans at a lower interest rate, but that also, you know, might not be the case given the way that things are currently. So would just give a plea that some consideration is given to what the impact would be if interest rates had not reached their peak, and indeed did continue to climb, particularly for that picture in 2024-25 when the short-term debt is maturing.
Thank you. Anyone else? So we're being asked Cabinet tonight to note the Treasury Management Outturn and Annual Report, and I thank members for those contributions. It is coming to full council, and I think at that point we'll make some amendments which speak to the points that particularly Lauren and Tristan have made, and absolutely my full support for training for members. This is important. It's not the kind of thing that can just be done in a couple of hours induction training. It needs a much more developed piece of training than that, and we'll be talking to Phil Watts and his team about how we achieve that. So with that, I'm asking you to note the Treasury Management Outturn report as set out in recommendation at 1.1, please. Is that agreed? Okay, thank you very much. And with that, that's the end of the meeting. So I'm really pleased for everybody's contributions tonight, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon.